Hello and welcome to the last word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we are back after a refreshing international break away. Where look, we're coming back with a bang. We've got some big shows to bring to you. This one is one of our biggest ones, I think, in a while, which is great to be, like I say, joined by a really special guest alongside my co-host and partner of 8 years in crime, Jason McGovern, is alongside me. Jace, how are you? Love to be back alongside me.
All good, mate. All good. Been enjoying the international break where I saw England smash 800 and odd runs and win a test match on a dead flat pitch. So that's what international breaks are for. I can properly get into cricket then. Whilst English football tried to play Angeball and got absolutely overrun.
Isn't it always the way? Always the way. Listen, we're joined by a very special guest before I bring him in. Look, we come to you, of course, on what again feels like another big week for Spurs in terms of what's to come. Huge London derby against West Ham United to come on the Saturday, of course, for our obviously watching audience, for our viewing audience at this moment. So I'm conscious we've got some Aussies that'll be waking up very early in the morning for this one. So, like I say, thank you guys for all your support out there. And look, a reminder of where we are with Spurs at the moment. It feels like it's been ages since we've recorded on this show. Obviously, Spurs at the moment, we find ourselves currently in terms of the Premier League having obviously 3 wins, the 1 draw and the 3 defeats. We've scored 14 goals. We've conceded 8 at the moment. Let's be honest about it. In comparison to last season, it's not where we want to be. But I think as many have kind of become accustomed to, we're on a journey. And it'll be interesting where that journey takes us. And we're going to know a little bit more and learn more about that journey because we're joined by a superb journalist, author of the brilliant Angeball book, and we're going to know more about this as we go on. We're joined by Vince Rugari on Last Word on Spurs. Jason there, proudly holding up to our watching audience. Vince, thank you so much for your time. Lovely to have you on here. How are you first? Are you well?
Good morning, gents. Yeah, very well. It's not that early here, I should say, by the way. It's 8 a.m. So a good time for people in Australia if they're jumping on the train or whatever on their way to work. And yeah, look, one thing I've learned covering, well, not so much covering Spurs, but keeping an eye on Spurs very closely over the last year or so is that you blokes don't have small weeks, do you? They're all big weeks. There's always something going on. So this is just another one of them, I reckon.
It's just another one of them. And again, it's quite funny, Vince. If we kind of roll the clock back a couple of weeks ago, Spurs are, on the verge of 6 wins, 6 straight wins, which would be the first time since 2018. Jason will know the dizzying heights of the Jose Mourinho era, how much he adored the Jose Mourinho era. We won't get into that. That'll be a different chat if we go there. But the fact that they lost to Brighton meant for Tottenham it was their worst start to a Premier League season after 7 games since the 08-09 season, when they only got 2 points after 7. I think on the whole, just to play and bring some balance to the show, I don't think anyone feels that it has been our worst start to Premier League season since then. But there definitely feels like, as we've known for the last, I would say, 5-6 months, that there is some, to be fair, some negativity amongst the camp, some that are unsure whether this is going to work, some that maybe need convincing. And that's where bringing someone like Vince is a great opportunity to learn more about Ange, because he would have faced similar doubts at all the clubs, many of the clubs he would have managed. And it's interesting to bring you onto this point, Vince, because this book has been hugely popular since you wrote it. And I suppose the key thing to ask you to begin with is what actually brought you to want to write this book of Ange Postecoglou?
So it wasn't really my idea, actually. It was one of those perfect storm kind of things. On the morning that Ange got appointed as Spurs manager, a publisher in Australia called Hachette had a routine sort of presentation in our offices at the Sydney Morning Herald, where I work, where it was going to be like, this is who we are. If you're a journo who wants to write a book, this is the process. This is how you write a proposal, blah, blah, blah. I actually missed that whole meeting because I was busy writing stories about the fact that we've got an Australian managing in the Premier League for the first time, which was fantastic. But I found the bloke afterwards who did the meeting in our office kitchen, had a quick chat to him, introduced myself, said, mate, sorry, I missed the meeting. I was writing stories about Ange. And he's like, oh, yeah, how about that? We've been half thinking about maybe finding a writer to do a book on him. And I'm like, well, all right, let's keep talking, because I've been pretty fortunate to have covered Ange's football very closely since his days at Brisbane Roar, which was like 2009, 2010. So we're talking, almost 15 years ago, which makes me feel incredibly old saying that out loud. Jesus, where's the time gone? And I've been, I've travelled with the Socceroos and have kept a really close eye on him since he left Australia. And I'm like, mate, I'd love to write a book on Ange. And within a couple of weeks, I got an offer to do it. Ran it past Ange, who I've got a reasonably okay relationship with. He told me to rip in, basically, just go for it. He couldn't be heavily involved because he's obviously got some time constraints on him at that point in particular as well, starting out as Spurs manager. And mate, the rest is history. I'm glad I did it because if I saw another Ange book on the shelves, particularly one that came out of Australia and it didn't have my name on it, I would have thought, you idiot. Why haven't you done that? So I'm glad I have.
Brilliant. I mean, you touched upon obviously there the fact you've spoken to Ange. I'm intrigued to know when you first met him and how close have you been reporting on the teams he's managed and his overall career, Vince?
Yeah, so as I said, me and Ange go back to his days at Brisbane Raw when I was actually living an hour south of Brisbane at a place called the Gold Coast and studying there and sort of just starting out with some freelance jobs in journalism. And one of them, was for a website which was no longer around, and I was covering all the sport in southeast Queensland. And that included spending a lot of time at Brisbane Raw training. This is the period where they were just starting out in terms of their undefeated streak and just the way they made people in Australia reimagine football overall, to be honest, because the things he did, and I spent a long chapter talking about the Raw Salona days in the book, but, I can't overstate how massive it was for Ange Postecoglou to take a group of players who we thought couldn't do much beyond play, fairly basic transitional set piece, counter-attacking kind of football and make them play with no word of a lie like Barcelona. Like the style was mesmerising, and it made me think in particular as well, maybe everything we've learned about, everything we've told ourselves about where Australia fits into the global order of things, maybe that's wrong in a way. If he can do that with this team, I thought, well, anything's in play now in football, really. If you're good enough and you've got a plan and you can make people buy into it, that for me was a real watershed moment in just learning about the game. But also Ange, even back then I thought like, wow, this guy's got something. I thought back then he was absolutely special to do what he did with that team. I saw it that far back. A lot of people in Australia did. But I'm just lucky that from there on, my career happened to, coincide with his to some extent. Like, I eventually got a job with the Australian Associated Press in 2015, and my first job was to cover the Asian Cup that we won. And then after that, I spent a lot of time on the road with Ange as he was Socceroos coach, traveling through Asia, watching him, bring his style in circumstances where you thought, like, there's no way this is gonna, like, how can you play like this when we're in Dubai and it's 40 degrees, or like, isn't this the time? You're 1-0 up away from home, critical 3 points. You've got them in the bag. Why don't you just sit back and sort of see this one out, and bag the points? Obviously, that doesn't happen with him, and I was learning that sort of in real time. And then, yeah, mate, I've been very lucky to have the job that I have, and the fact that it's enabled me to cover this man's journey closely has been a massive highlight in my career because, beyond football, it's just an amazing sports story for Australia, but also he is an amazing story for Australia in terms of presenting a different face of our country to the rest of the world. I feel like a lot of the world's got us pegged as, Crocodile Dundee kind of, Anglo sort of situation. And for me, as someone who comes from Italian stock, the fact that we've got a Greek Australian, showing the world that there's another side to Australia that maybe people don't know about is wonderful.
Is that one of the major problems that he's faced? Is that he's come from what English and Europeans would class as kind of a, for want of a better phrase, a non-football nation, and how is that criticism perceived? Because it's a bit like if an Englishman suddenly turns up at Essendon and tells you all how to play Aussie, Aussie football.
Yeah. Well, look, football's not the biggest sport in Australia, but there is a big football community in Australia. Now, not all of them are engaged with Australian football. There's a whole bunch of people here who love football but only watch the European stuff, and I personally can't stand that. But the football community here is robust, and we've been through a lot. And the people who care about football in Australia, as I sort of allude to in one of the earlier chapters, possibly care about it more than you blokes do over there, in the sense that we've got to get up at stupid hours to watch games overseas and somehow make that fit into our day, you know. And if you want to know about football in Australia, you can't just pick up the paper or turn on the TV, you know, and it will be served to you. You've got to go out and find it, and you've got to engage with people. It feels almost like a secret society sometimes, particularly the people like me who are so invested in domestic stuff and Aussie stuff. It's like you've got to seek out like-minded individuals and really put some effort into following the game to the level that we do. So while overseas the perception of Australia as a non-football nation, you know, I get that. There's a community here who are massively invested and educated and interested, and Ange is part of that family for sure, in terms of people who will just hoover up anything that's available on the game we love.
The book. I hold the book up again. Look, the book is called Angeball, but define Angeball for me. Is it a playing style? Is it a mentality thing? Is it designed a bit like cricket's baseball, the perception to cover your weaknesses? Is it only defined by actually winning? What is Angeball?
Yeah, it's. I tried to write a whole book on this, and I'm not sure if I ever actually gave a clear definition. For me, the answer is it's sort of all of that, and it's kind of above it all. It's a sort of state of mind, I think. Angeball is predominantly about not caring what basically other people tell you is possible or what is not possible. It's about doing what you think is the right thing to do and doing it at 100% full bore all of the time. It's definitely, you know, there's stylistic elements to it. I think when you're watching a game of football, for me, I can spot it. It's a relentlessness in the actions of the players, not just, you know, attacking, but also defensively. It's a manic press. It's a quick movement forward, but obviously not just, you know, hoofing it forward or going forward for the sake of it. There's method to it. There's patterns of play where, for me, I can spot it, and I'm like, yeah, you don't see non-Ange teams do that sort of thing. And it's probably more similar than I would like to admit with Bazball. As I mentioned to you earlier, Jason, there's a brief mention of Bazball in the book, and hands up, I couldn't include the word Bazball without a slight jab alongside of it. You'll have to forgive me for that, because I admire it greatly, and as I said earlier, I just wish it was being deployed in another nation.
It's good. I mean, over the past 18 months, we've discovered a lot about Andy's career and his achievements in Oz. I think it's fair to say, Vince. So we'll try and keep the discussion relative, if we can, to the job Andy's doing at Tottenham. But I think the moment from the early days that many would have already seen that was, again, accessible via YouTube, is that infamous TV interview when the TV pundit and former player Craig Foster at the time are debating. Now, I'm intrigued to know how you feel Ange has paved the way. Well, how do you think that interview has paved the way for Ange to handle the media? And do you think some of the lessons he's learned from that interview he abides by today? Because I think what's been really intriguing is that we've got a number of different journalists that come on last one on Spurs that have covered, obviously, the time of Ange so far. And it's a mixture of opinions. Some feel they've got to be really prepared for those press conferences, and we will take you to task. There is, I think, a feeling that, you know, you've really got to be precise in the questions that you're asking Ange, and doesn't like being answered the same question twice. So relating it back to that interview of so many years ago, what do you look at when you see Ange now in the media, on the face of Sky, BBC, ITV, the interviews that he's given so far?
That's spot on, by the way. Like, just because I've written a book about the guy and really obviously like him doesn't mean I haven't asked many a stupid question to Ange Postecoglou in press conferences and gotten slapped back. You know, he's never brutal about it, but it is comprehensive. It is a sort of, if you come unprepared, as you say, or if you don't put too much thought into your question, you get an answer as appropriate, I guess you would say. I'm not sure how much of Ange's media performances we can trace back to that sort of Craig Foster interview. Like that was a very much a one-off, like a massive ambush that he kind of walked into, and really critical, as I explained in the book, in terms of how Ange was perceived in Australia. This was at a time when the whole game was transitioning to, from a predominantly ethnic sport to, a big business sort of enterprise. The old NSL became the A-League, so we went from ethnic clubs to franchises. And as I explained in the book, and this is, I think, why Ange's story sort of, you have to have the Australian perspective to understand this, because when you understand this, a lot of things click into place. But he was perceived at that time, the era that the game was leaving behind was deemed to be old soccer, and we were moving into new football. And it's quite ironic that because he was Greek, and because he'd coached in the NSL, and because the game was moving in a whole different direction, and he was struggling with the national youth teams, the game collectively agreed as a community, so to speak, that he was old soccer. He was a barnacle on the ship. We were moving on in a new direction. We don't need guys like him anymore. When you look back, it's absolutely insane, because back then you would have to say he probably had the blueprint for everything we want to do as a football nation. We just threw the baby out the bathwater when it comes to him. I think the thing that he took from that interview, above all else, aside from probably don't show your teeth like that ever again, because he certainly did, is more just around control and when he likes to leave a job. I don't think he particularly enjoyed his destiny being handed to him during that interview, even though he'd been told his contract was up before he went on that interview with Craig Foster. But just from some of the things he said subsequently, I think the main lesson he drew out of that was, when I'm done with a job, I want it to be my call, on my terms, sort of thing. And from then, I don't think he's been sacked from a job since. I think he's left all of his jobs on his own accord. No job. I think that might be the only job he's ever been sacked from, actually, is the national youth teams. And whether he got sacked or whether his contract was not renewed after 6 years, you can debate that. But that's the thing he took away from it the most, I think, is maintain control of your own destiny. Yeah. But in terms of media performer, I think he's bloody unbelievable, to be honest. And I think that ties back into how he got the job with Brisbane Roar. He couldn't get a job here after that interview. In terms of coaching, that is, he couldn't even get an assistant coaching job in the A-League, which is staggering to think. The way he sort of reintroduced himself to Australian football audiences was as a pundit on Fox Sports covering A-League and Socceroos matches. Nobody really has covered the game here in the sort of clear-eyed way that he did. He really broke things down in a way that sort of nobody else here was capable of doing, and not many since have matched him. So it's ironic that, in the end, the way he gets back into coaching is through the media, funnily enough.
Just one final thing, if you don't mind me asking, Vince, on that interview. I know it's a way back, but do you think that did create an impression that Ange was out of his depth and that he was stubborn, adverse to criticism, and a man who spoke a good game but would normally deflect from his own faults? So, I mean, I'm just intrigued to know from you, like I say, the kind of feeling on the back of that interview. Are any of those points tied into that, in your opinion?
I would say that the interview created the false impression of some of that, yeah. But I think when you actually listen closely to the interview, and as I've done with the book, sort of tie in the context of what they're talking about, actually.
Yep.
Ange got sort of stitched up, He wasn't deflecting from his own faults at all. He was talking about the systemic issues within the game here in Australia, which continue to hold us back, particularly when it comes to youth international football. Our players just don't play enough football, It seemed like he was out of his depth because he went on national television and got, destroyed, basically. But and it certainly gave people that overall impression that you mentioned, but it was wrong, I think, because when you really break it down and you look at everything he's done since, I think this guy just got happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Probably shouldn't have gone on that interview if he knew that something like that was going to happen afterwards. But everything he says there, for me, and it's all sort of nutted out in the book, makes sense. We're still complaining about these issues, almost 20 years later in Australian football. It drives me mad. Let's not go down that road, please, because that'll be a long one.
I think as well, because many would say that, his critics would say he looks out of his depth and things, but there's plenty of systematic faults, if you like, at Tottenham over the past 20 years as well, which may well make life a little bit more difficult for Tottenham managers. But as you said, he went to Brisbane Roar, and he saw a club that always played attractive football, but the results were unpredictable at best. Does that ring a bell with any other club? And that many teams would come there, sit on a low block and play open counter-attack football in the open spaces that were left. Does that ring a bell with any club? So
yeah, just slightly.
Again, how did he turn Brisbane Roar to cover those problems?
Yeah, just by it sounds basic, but getting rid of the players who didn't fit what he wanted to do and bringing in the ones who did. Massive change. Like one of the first things he did at Brisbane Roar was get rid of Craig Moore, Bob Malcolm, a couple others. Big, particularly in the case of Craig Moore, an Australian icon, a Queenslander as well, someone who was looked at as sort of exactly the kind of guy you bring back to Australia to help young players learn. But he was slow, and some of these guys were slow. And so basically in the space of one off season, he got rid of all the old leaders, set the new order, brought in a whole bunch of players, which on paper didn't look like they'd be much chop. The midfield was run by Eric Partaloo, who was a guy who was playing for Greenock Morton or something like that in Scotland, former Australian youth international. Certainly not a maestro with his passing by any measure, but had a big tank and was given a role that masked his own weaknesses and maximized his strengths. His role was basically run around, mate, get the ball and give it to the other players. Basically, you're the six. You don't need to do anything fancy. And things just built. Like, I really encourage people to have a look at some Brisbane Roar highlights and just take a look because, it's the A-League, but the way they played was fantastic. Really, really fantastic. Their style was, they would run teams ragged. They would use that open space. And, where in the past it might have crucified them, here with Brisbane Roar, the Raw Salona era, any team who came to Brisbane Roar, they were cooked by about 60 minutes, to be honest, because they gave them the runaround. And, look, low blocks and all that sort of stuff were never really a problem once Angeball clicked properly at Brisbane Roar because you could throw anything at that team and they'd find a way to get past it. They were just a mesmerising machine. He had them right where they wanted. These players knew exactly what he wanted of them and they loved it and they gave everything of themselves because they could feel the enjoyment on the pitch, at training, in the games, and it sort of became a self-fulfilling sort of thing. Like, the more they gave, the more they got back, which made them want to give more. It's not often you see a team hit that sort of space for so long as well. 36 games over 2 seasons. This team was in a fantastic space for a very long period of time.
And how did he structure training to get his ideas over to players? And do you think the methods he used then could still be applied to the egotistical, if you like, the Premier League players that are used to being coached by, for want of a better phrase, by elite managers?
Yeah, from memory, and I do mention a little bit about this in the book. He had a few rules at training at that time when he was trying to bring in this, this very different short passing style of play to Brisbane Roar. I think there was a rule: no passes over waist height at training. When they're playing full 11v11, goals only count unless the whole team is over the halfway line to try and get defenders used to being up high, that high. Little things like that, I guess. There's probably more examples I can give you, or I could give you if I was aware of them, but there are certainly little things he did at training to foster his ideas. But when you talk about sort of the egotistical Premier League and international players, it's pretty simple for me. If they don't want to do what Ange says at training or whatever, because they've got an ego or they think they're better than it for whatever, they won't last long. They'll be gone. Simple as that. You fall in line or you're out, basically. That's how it has to be, really. So you park your ego at the door, I'd say. And fair to say, I don't think that he's had too many of those issues at Spurs this far. just judging by the way the players talk about him, and certainly by the exits. It's not like any massive stars have left aside from Harry Kane, and that was basically before he had a chance to even sink his teeth into him,
Yeah, that's fair. I think, like I say, we've seen with Ange that, although I say we've seen a number of players leave the club, I mean, you feel that's all been above board on what he's wanted to some degree. I'm intrigued to know, like I say, in terms of the summer window, and I know this is what we discussed a lot on last one on Spurs, if he got everything he wanted. I mean, again, it's an intriguing subject because he's obviously got a number of young players there, but at the same time, you just feel Spurs could have maybe given him more. But listen, we're going to come on to that definitely during the show. 2014, Vince, World Cup saw Ange on his biggest stage at that point, where the world will be watching. And despite being in a group of death, how much of the principles and transferring belief into players played a part in that campaign for you?
The whole campaign was basically the bedding in of that, really, because he got the job in October 2013. So the Socceroos had already qualified and didn't have long, really, before the World Cup. 6-8 months to prepare, which isn't long in international football. You're talking a handful of windows, which really means a handful of training sessions, to be honest, especially when you factor in the fact that Australian players have got to fly from halfway across the world, often only get into international camps a day or two before a match. So there's really not much access time with the players, but you could see it compared to the way that the Socceroos were playing before then. The ideas, you could see they were starting to happen. It wasn't maximum, obviously, because of the time constraints. And yeah, the fact that we had what was it? Spain, the Netherlands, and Chile. Which, if any nation landed in that group, you'd be tearing your hair out, really. Let alone Australia. Clearly, we were the team that were to finish bottom. I think we did, but even though we didn't win a game, I think we made a good statement on not only to the world but also to ourselves about there's something in this. It hasn't delivered the results on this occasion, but on one hand, look at the caliber of the opponents and look at ourselves, and two, look at how well we played. There was a period there where we were leading the Netherlands at a World Cup. I'm not sure I've had a feeling like that as an Australian football person since then. That doesn't happen often for us. And it was all down to sort of the way he wanted us to play and the relentlessness he fostered in the team. It was nowhere near sort of the finished article. That came a little bit later at the 2015 Asian Cup. But it was a special time, with a new group of players as well. I should say, 2006, Australia got out of the World Cup group stage for the first time, but that was with a team that featured, Mark Viduka, Harry Kewell, Vince Grella, all these guys, like Mark Schwarzer. It's our golden generation. We probably should be doing well with a team like that. Yep. In Holland, in Brazil, we had a team of, a couple of guys like Mark Bresciano on his last legs, Mile Jednak on the upward trajectory. But other than that, a lot of, guys who were either in the A-League or just left the A-League. A lot of unfancied names who, similar to what Ange did with Brisbane Roar, grew under his coaching and his methodology, it was a fantastic tournament for us, even though when you look at it, no results.
On that tournament, however much credit that the Australian side attracted for their performances, just how big, Vince, was the criticism of the actual results and the overall impression of the importance of results versus importance of the performances, in your opinion?
Look, it wasn't that bad, to be honest, because let's be fair, Dinkum, how many people, even in Australia, are expecting us to win games at World Cups, especially against those sort of nations? It's just to be overly critical of the results there, particularly for a guy who had been parachuted into the job not long before. There wasn't a whole lot of criticism. I think everyone really could see that he was using it in a way to almost build for that Asian Cup that was coming on home soil about 6 to 8 months after that. That was really the thing he was looking at when he took over the job. Yeah, okay, we had a World Cup to compete at and we gave our best. We absolutely did. But the real thing he was looking at is how can I get this team ready to win this Asian Cup on home soil? Because, once in a lifetime chance for Australia to win a major trophy here. He poured everything into that, and you could see the way they sort of built over that time. He got the job done, really. So there wasn't that much criticism. It was more just excitement about okay, this was good. Where can we go from here?
I like that. Listen, before Jason does come back in there, we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners and audio. We've only got over 2,000 of you that are watching us live. So thank you so much, as always, for incredible support for last word on Spurs. As I've said, and as Vince was laughing in the background, it is a big week for Spurs coming up. They're all big weeks. They are. We've got West Ham to come, of course, on the weekend. And look, we're bringing you this show because obviously when you have a pause during, let's say, the Premier League with an international break, it gives you that opportunity to reflect and take stock and really kind of gauge where we are. I mean, again, listen, when we bring wonderful guests like this onto the show to discuss Ange Postecoglou, I think the great thing is there's so many different feelings around, the fan base about what can work, what is working, what isn't working. And I think it's just intriguing to kind of get different perspectives and different views out there. And as Jason has said, I think already during the show, the key for us is to kind of bring Vince to life in regards to knowing more about Ange as a person. And really, when it comes to our beloved Tottenham, the difficulties that many managers have faced, can Ange get it right? So I'm going to hand back to Jason because, unfortunately, you'll need to remind us a little bit of what happened a couple of weeks ago, Jason, which will tie in to his next question. So, Jason, I'll hand back to you. And a reminder, of course, for those that are really enjoying the show so far, those that haven't got the book already, it's out now in all major retailers. I know it's very, very popular. We've seen, I think, this book everywhere so far, Vince. So it's obviously doing very, very well. And just a reminder, like I say, keep buying the book. It's a great, great read out there. And I'll hand back to Jason. If I can bring him off mute, that is, if I'll hand back to Jason.
There's a perception at the moment that for some in the media and amongst our own fan base, if you like, that we're soft and naive, and the word Spursy yet again gets thrown around, particularly since the Brighton game. How does he feel about criticisms of his sides being soft or naive, and what does he think the cause of them is? Is it his tactics, or would he highlight players not interpreting them? And does he get stung by criticisms of being poor defending, or is it a case of for some people say he just doesn't care about the defensive side of the game?
Yeah, I think he definitely cares about the defensive side of the game. He just approaches it in a different way, I think, to other coaches. He looks at the whole thing, right? Not certain aspects of it, and thinks I've got to fix the defense or I've got to fix the midfield. He sees it as one unit, and when it's where it needs to be, everything is perfectly in sync. As you could probably see.
That kind of explains why he kept saying last year, it's not all about set pieces.
Well, that's exactly right.
Other things before I get to set pieces, yeah.
That's exactly right. And so in that 5-match run where you guys were, I should get in the habit of stop saying you guys, because as I mentioned to you earlier as well, I identify now as a Spurs fan.
I mean, we all try to distance ourselves, Vince, so I wouldn't worry about
it. Yeah, I'm trying already. There you go. But when we were flying those 5 games, defense looked fine. There were no issues with set pieces. That's because the collective was where it needed to be. And so the idea that he doesn't care about defending, for me, is rubbish and a bit of a misinterpretation of sort of what he's all about. Of course he does. In fact, his teams, when they're at their best, they not only have the highest goals scored, in that competition invariably, but they've also got the lowest goals conceded. It's a product of what he does when it's done well. In terms of the perception around being soft and naive, I'm sure it would sting him, but I'm not sure how much of it he would feel personally that it's down to him, because when I look at particularly the Brighton game, how did they? I'm still staggered by that game, because the first half all over him. Clearly, the players thought it was won. To some extent, maybe he needs to cop a bit of a rap for that. For whatever he said led to that belief in those players, I guess, because they're his players. He signed them, most of them. But I can't imagine he said anything other than what he would usually say, which is you must do this at all times, 100% of the time. Like, I can't think of a single time where he said to a team that I'm aware of, well done, lads, 2-0. Time to sort of ease up and see this one out, no injuries, etc. That's just the entire opposite of his whole ethos. So I can't imagine he would have instructed them anything remotely like that. It must have just been a mental fault, I guess, in the players at that time. And let's be honest, like that sort of mental issue has been present in Spurs for a long time. Conte raged about it. Yeah, the squad has turned over, but I'm not sure. Is there a broader thing that is infecting the players? I don't know. You guys would know better than me, but what I do know is this guy will do everything he can to fix it, and I'm fairly confident that he will. It just seems like it might take a little bit longer to get over this stubborn mental hurdle where they're at. And for me, it seems like one of the last hurdles, right? Because the football, when it's on, is fantastic. The way Spurs were playing for those 5 games is fantastic. Can they just get that last click, that last thing in their head to just reinforce the fact that it's an always thing, not a sometimes thing or until the game is one thing. It's an always, all the time, to the 99th minute if there are 9 minutes of stoppage time thing. That is something that often takes his teams a little bit longer to learn. Maybe Spurs haven't learned it yet, but you look through his teams and it's there. It's present throughout. Late winners, equalisers, even goals late in games when they're 3-0 up and we're already home and hosed. They go to the wire. And that's something that I think needs to be learned. And until that gets learned properly, they'll be called, naive and weak. Because sadly, that's what it is to cough up a game as they did against Brighton like that.
They've been called naive and weak for donkey's years, mate.
I mean,
yeah.
On this point, Jace, it's. I mean, the 2 things, Vince, that I just see that's really hard for any manager that's come to Spurs in the last 20 years to change is, number one, I think the fan base mentality is that at the point of something looking like it's going to go wrong, a lot of the fans lose their heads. I'm not saying every fan lose their heads, but a lot of fans lose their head because they see the first point of there being a crisis and they immediately go to that crisis point because that's what we've just been used to over the last 15, 16 years. So you're trying to change a mentality in the fan base that is used to losing. And then on top of that, you've got inside the club, with no disrespect in terms of a hierarchy that aren't used to winning. So on top of that, he's also trying to change that along with the players. And when you add those 3 combinations together, players, board and fans, that's a massive thing to change. And to be fair, they've had some of the best managers in the world, you'd say, in terms of on paper, when it comes to Mourinho, Conte, that haven't been able to do that. And it's just, I don't know. It's a club like Tottenham. I've always felt to win here would be something very, very special because so many have tried to do it and failed, Vince. Do you know what I mean? It'd be his biggest achievement yet. I really believe that. I've said that a lot. His biggest achievement yet to get a trophy at a club where, with no disrespect, the fans at the first point of a concern don't really, I don't mean in a disrespectful way, don't believe. You've got a hierarchy that maybe the cup isn't their most prioritised possession. I think top 4 has always been more of a definite for the club, a bigger thing. But the thing about Ange is what more than anything is doesn't set limits on anything, does he? He doesn't set limits on anything.
No, you're spot on. And I agree with what you said. And I think there can't be too many bigger challenges in world football than to snap this mentality challenge at Tottenham Hotspur, really, when you think about it. And I also believe if Ange can't do it, it may not be able to be done, to be honest, because you've now got a manager who I believe is, absolute world class. His entire methodology is perfectly in sync with what the club says it's about and the motto and everything, the history. That's possibly what was missing from the Conte and Mourinho era. So you've got the guy who is a good coach, coaches the way that the club likes to play and wants to play. We can only take Daniel Levy at his word in terms of he's given him a 4-year contract, and he said at that fan forum last year, if it takes us a little bit longer to win playing the way we want to play, then it just takes us a little bit longer. So you'd like to think that the board knows exactly what they got themselves into with Ange. I would have thought that when Ange spoke to them about joining Tottenham, he would have made it very clear as well what he's about and what the process looks like. So I can only imagine they took that on board. Doesn't mean they won't change their position at a given time in the future. But it seems to me there's an understanding there. And look, the fans are the fans. The fans will and do and should follow the game how they want.
And just to be clear on that point about the fans, I am one of those fans that does veer to a point of a crisis every week. So I'm also putting myself in that category.
I think, part of the thing of being naive and soft, if you like, I think as fans, you can't be responsible for what happens on the pitch. But, we are at that stage where if Manchester City are 2-0 up and concede, there's not a problem in amongst Manchester City fans or Arsenal fans or whatever. But immediately Brighton score, probably 80% of Spurs fans are, we know what's going to happen next. It's like the head goes down immediately, doesn't it? And, at Man United, for instance, when we went 1-0 up in 2 minutes, if you follow social media, we scored too early. It's like, no, this is us on the front foot. We've got to score. No, we'll never roll onto it now. It's like that's become the mentality of so many in the fan base as well, so that you can never react to defeats like that.
Yeah, you guys have been through it. What can I say?
on this point, we don't mind me asking, Vince. You go back to Brighton. We're 2-0 up. The game is very much in our hands, and there'll be some would just say, "Now look, control the game, see it out." And we know that's not really Ange's way of doing things. We've heard James Maddison say that in interviews that the thing that Ange hates the most is when the team are in their ascendancy and they're 2 or 3-0 up. He hates them standing off. So why is Ange's belief, and this is what I'm really intrigued to know from you, why is it so strong on not changing and not trying to be more careful when you have got an advantage like that? And what is he trying to create by doing so? Because you would have seen it after the Brighton game. Many were saying at 2-0, why couldn't he have just shut up shop? Why couldn't he maybe go over low block in the second half and see out the game? Why would he not do that? What is he trying to change for you when you see things like that?
So I was very lucky in the writing of this book that I had access to some portions of an unfinished documentary on Ange's time with the Socceroos. And this stuff included some team talks he gave the Socceroos during their qualification for the 2018 World Cup. And I'm going to read a portion here because this is page 197 of the book, and it addresses this exactly. And I think this is exactly what you're getting at. I love this passage. I may as well read the whole thing out because for me, it sums up everything and it answers everything. And I was thrilled to hear it because I've never heard the question that you asked me be answered in such a precise way as Ange did when he's talking to the players here, So we've played in 40-degree heat and we're still trying to fucking press. Doesn't make sense. Why are we doing that? Because that's how it gets into your DNA, to do it when it's not supposed to be done. Not to do it when it's easy to be done. That's why we had you pressing in Thailand, in fucking Saudi Arabia, in the UAE. Why are we trying to score more goals when we're already leading away from home in places like Iran and Saudi Arabia? Because I want us to be a team that goes right to the end, that takes the game to the opposition, that attacks opposition, that has no fear of losing. But I can't create that if I say to you, when we're playing against Iraq, that at 1-0 up, shut up shop. Then it doesn't become part of your DNA. It's just a safe road. All you'll get from that, a safe road, is a good career, a pat on the back, maybe some money in the bank and a decent life. Nothing wrong with that, boys, if that's what you want. But fuck me, if there's something better, why not grab it? Why not grab it? There's something that's going to be passed on for generations that you can do today. Why not? And for me, not only does that answer the question, it talks about why Ange he's not interested in just winning games of football or just winning trophies. And as fans, that's all we want, right? That's all we want. But his sights are set higher than that. He wants to achieve things that mean more than that, that stand the test of time. It's not just about you go down the safe road, as he says. You can win a League Cup. You can do something like that. But he wants more. He's looking for the sort of the teams that play the way that people will talk about 20 years after that, and the memories that don't just sit in your heart around, yeah, we won a trophy that day. Wasn't that amazing? It was more like, geez, that team, the way they played made my heart sing, sort of thing, and his teams in the past have always done that. I really hope it happens with Spurs, but there's the answer, that's why and you'll know something's wrong is if Spurs ever do that, if they ever do sit back defending a lead, that's when I'll be worried, to be honest, is because either he will have deferred from his path or the players will have taken things in their own hands and stopped listening to him. Now, if I see that happen, that's when my alarm bells will start to be like, something's not right here. They're not doing what he says. Or maybe he's changed what he says, which I can't imagine will ever happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why.
It's fascinating. I mean,
all I said, Rick, wasn't it, on the Brighton game was because you lose the game and all the criticism of it comes afterwards. But as I said, I think on the pod, not a single Spurs fan was saying at half-time change anything.
no.
Every single one of us said, go on, just keep playing as we're playing. And yet because we lose, then comes the thing of, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? But nobody wanted us to do those things at half-time.
Nor should you want to.
Team talk.
Nor should you want to, in my opinion.
No, I don't, mate. I said, I don't ever.
It's fascinating.
I
I
hate
mean,
Lone Rock.
on this point, it's hugely ironic, considering he's followed at Spurs and the differences in those interpretations of the systems, like Conte, for example. But it was Italy's use of in 2016, the back three and the wing backs under Conte that left a big mark on him. And it's also, of course, a system many of his Spurs critics feel would suit us more, so that we aren't as wide open and as vulnerable to the transitions, which, again, I think you look, again, at the different systems now, which, again, brings to the point that when you look at Spurs' squad in general, that I do feel as a team and the way we set up, I think we are better in terms of going for the approach of Ange's rather than sitting back. Because I think the thing we have seen this season on a number of occasions is that defensively, we aren't strong enough to sit in a low block. We've made so many defensive lapses this season in terms of errors that I don't think that is possible. I think what fans are seeking and maybe looking for is a balance to the way in which the team does play. And I think that's one of the things where, again, that might be coming, Vince. And it's a case that, Ange is just trying to find his best team to do that. He might not have all the players to do that right now. And I think what we have seen is that when Angeball, if you want to call it that, has played in its fruition for a good 30, 40 minutes, it looks incredible. We saw that, the Chelsea home game, James, which I'll take your mind back to. We knew the result of how it ended, but that was some absolutely scintillating football from Tottenham. It was incredible. But I think the key that many are looking at is, can this be sustainable in the long term? But I'll hand back to Jason if I can. And it's been a fascinating one so far. Jason, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, there's kind of three groups of us. Those like me that have bought into what he's trying to do and can see, despite the faults, what the end goal is, and knows that there's going to be the down days trying to get there. There's plenty of people, and just looking at the comments down the side at the moment, you can see there's plenty that think he's a fraud and out of his depth and hasn't got a clue, and the Premier League football's way above him. But then there's, even in our group chat, isn't there, Rick? We've got the differences, and then you've got that third little bit that thinks, I like what I'm seeing with Angeball when it wins, but then when it goes wrong, can't we just tweak one or two of the little things just to do it? And of course, that's a criticism that was involved of him in FIFA's Confederations Cup in 2015, when the media asked him, why did it work against Chile but didn't against Germany and Cameroon? And he snapped at the media at that point and said, look, one day I'll get replaced by John the Pragmatist. How did that remark go down? And why was he so stubborn to take that backward step?
Yeah, that remark, people were starting to turn on him a little bit at that point in the Socceroos. His whole second half of the job with the Socceroos was when he brought in that Conte-inspired three at the back formation. And people were convinced that Australian players weren't good enough to play with the three at the back for some reason. And that because we were struggling a little bit in qualification, that Ange was putting at risk World Cup qualification for Australia, which would have massive flow-on effects to the health of the whole game here. So basically, he was deploying a system and a formation that he believed would make Australian teams not only reach a World Cup, but be competitive once they got there against big nations. The betting in period was dicey, and people got tetchy because of that, but he refused to yield at all. Why is he stubborn to take a backward step? I think that's sort of answered by the speech he gave before, just relating to, why do they push on when they're ahead of games and things like that. The answer is because backwards is backwards. He must go forward with this. Like, you must continue down this road. And look, in terms of the three camps thing that you mentioned, I was probably in the third camp there for periods when he was Socceroos coach. I thought, mate, why are you bringing in the three at the back now? Like, if we played 4 against Iraq, we wouldn't have drawn 1-0. The players at the back would have been more comfortable. We would have seen that one out 1-0. 3 points there. We qualified directly. We don't go through the playoffs. Why are you putting this at risk? The answer is because he thinks that's the way to go to achieve the thing that he really wants at the end, which is not qualification. It's the other thing after that that matters more, you know? So, yeah, look, John. I remember the John the Pragmatist remark very well. I wasn't there in Russia, but I heard him say it. And it was around that time when I was just starting to think, like, geez, he's getting really pissed off here. And I think that's because he'd delivered success for Australia already. I think it was possibly upset that this was after the Asian Cup, yes. So he'd won the trophy. He'd done the thing that he was really there to do. Everyone could see what his football was capable of. I think he was wondering, like, why aren't they with me? I've got the runs on the board. Why are they? What's the issue here? And so he said, you know, he would get replaced by John the Pragmatist, and he did. Bert van Marwijk took over for the Russia World Cup after Ange left, and we played like the Socceroos have often played at World Cups, which is a style of football which says to the world, we are here to make up the numbers because we think you can smash us, which for me is not fun at all. I'd rather not be at a World Cup, to be honest, than set up like that and almost admit defeat before you've even started. And I think most people who support Tottenham as well would hate that as well.
I think it's fair to say, though, Vince, that the all-out attacking way of Ange wasn't wholeheartedly accepted during the 2018 World Cup qualifying campaign. And the positives when weighed against the actual results were being criticised by a lot of ex-players and pundits such as Mark Bosnich, and repercussions of dominating games but not winning them hit him badly when in a game Jason remembers Australia failed to beat Thailand at home in a vital World Cup qualifier.
I try to forget that game, huh?
It's Tottenham Leicester, it's Tottenham Newcastle this season. They absolutely
100%. I remember that game. I was at a pub with my mates, I think, I'm pretty sure. And I was just like, I think we had to win by multiple, from memory, we had to win by multiple goals to qualify directly. This was the last game, I think, in the phase. And we had a goal difference issue or something like that. Anyway, we had to win by as many goals as possible to give us any hope of qualifying directly and avoiding the playoffs. And as you say, we smashed them. We had like 40 plus shots on goal. It was one of those games where it just looks like someone has inserted magnets into the posts and the ball for comical reasons. Like we should have won that game 7-0. There's no doubt about it whatsoever, but we just didn't. And like, what do you do after a game like that, huh? It's a bit like
Leicester.
It's there. They just freaking do it. You know what I mean? Like the system has delivered the ball in the spots where it should go in the net. The coach's job is done at that point, you know? But I suppose that's the beauty and the ugliness of football, isn't it? Is it just what other sport can deliver you a situation like that where you do everything right, but because you can't do the last thing, that's it, you know? I hate this game, huh? Now you've reminded me about how I felt that night. Bloody hell.
We're going to move on, Vince.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the thing is then you get the criticism when you then don't win the game because the other team go down the other end late on, get the equaliser, and it's manager's fault. Shouldn't have been doing this, but it happens, doesn't it? We've seen it plenty of times. When the criticism is heard by players in the aftermath of defeats or bad results, like we got a hint of it, as Rick alluded to earlier with the James Maddison interview earlier in the season. How does that criticism affect the team? And does that criticism make Ange even more stubborn, give him even more beliefs and determination that, look, I'm not having the criticism come in, and the siege mentality comes down for him?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you know how like the Incredible Hulk turns green when he gets angry? I feel like Ange turns green when he gets criticised. Like I know he says, I don't let the criticism affect me. It clearly does to some extent. And I think it reinforces everything he believes in. It makes him want to do it more. It makes him want to double down more, which is an insane quality, huh? Like, not many people are like that, but he
Just
won't cop it. He
perfectly
won't.
it's
Yeah,
perfectly, as you say there, Vince, on the trophy point.
yeah,
We're again about the second season where he acts like that. Please carry on.
yeah. No, he just it's an amazing quality that he has. Look, I'm not. I guess when the players are where he wants them to be, they'll react the same way in terms of the criticism when it comes. But his overall thing is, if you tell him you can't do this, mate, because of these reasons, he'll be like, "Nah, I disagree, and I'm going to show you." So I think he does. I'm not sure how much the criticism affects him. In this, I think it rather serves as motivation. I think he likes to hear it just to give him a little bit of a top up, So it's like, oh, is that what you reckon? All right, we'll show you. And every time in the past, he's shown them. To be honest, he's usually turns out right.
On this point, it's interesting. Just the final one on that qualification piece. With World Cup qualification eventually secure for 2018 with a playoff victory against Honduras, Ange walked away from the job, where he was eventually worn down by the criticisms by some in the media, and criticisms that his systems were almost an experimental game to just see how far he could use that style, almost if it was a plaything. Would you grow along that point as well, Vince, that the criticism got him down that period? Part of the reason why he would leave the role?
Yeah, look, there's another freaking 3-hour podcast in why he left the Socceroos. I'm still trying to piece together the reasons, but I think you're right. I think he just realised the backlash that came on him during that period and the way he was treated in Australia while he was trying to deliver the Australian people effectively what they wanted. I think he just realised that his overall goal as Socceroos coach was not to qualify for a World Cup or win a thing or whatever. It was, nothing less than to change the country, so to speak, a cultural change to live football where it belongs in Australia. And I think he just realised with a few different things that it wasn't happening. And as someone who cares so deeply about football in Australia, as opposed to football itself, but our football, where it sits in our country and what it means for us, I feel the same way. We're so passionate about it, and possibly too passionate to the point where it affects you when it doesn't go well, which it often doesn't. And I think Ange was in that space. I think he just realised, this is not healthy for me. I don't like what it's doing to me. I don't like this feeling. I've got to go spread my wings and head overseas, which was, look, thank God he did, because look at what he's done since. But look, a lot of the criticism at that time was, if not totally inaccurate, then certainly overblown. When you look at where we finished in qualification, I think did we miss out on goal difference or 1 point or something like that? We lost one game for the whole third phase of qualification. And when you look back on it and compare it certainly to the campaigns we've had since, I look back and I'm just like, I can't believe people smashed him here as hard as they did. And had they not, we might have been able to see where that 3 at the back system would have taken the Socceroos at the 2018 World Cup in Russia. Would we have been able to spring a surprise against a team like a Denmark or a France? Who knows? I've learned certainly over the years that you don't put ceilings on what Ange teams can do. But that one is a bit of a damn, it's a bit of a shame we didn't get to see where that journey ended,
It is, again, interesting.
Australia did, as you say, bring in then. They go from the Ange thing to John the Pragmatist when they go to the World Cup with Van Marwijk, and the differences immediately became obvious in how the team was set up and played, but no difference in the results, no better results at all.
No, it sucked, and it was a very hollow World Cup to watch, because that Ange question that I was talking about before was just there in the back of everyone's minds, and we're there and we're in Russia and we're competing, and players are giving it everything, but they're being given instructions by a guy who clearly thinks we're shit, clearly thinks we don't belong there and that we should bow to the opposition. And for me, that's not what it's about, And I think through that tournament, a lot of people watched it and were like, geez, maybe some people regretted how they went about it, or I certainly just was there just wishing, like, geez, I wish Ange was coaching us still,
I mean, I feel like there's Spurs fans at the moment that have forgotten where that particularly say since the Brighton game, we should do this, go low block and make ourselves hard. But you think, we've just had 3 years of pragmatic football. Where's that taken us? where's it got us? And you know, we're just not a team that this assumption that if you immediately go to low block and become pragmatic, that you'll definitely win the games anyway. It's not the case.
Exactly.
Simply
It's not the way.
case.
It's not the way of the club, and it's also not the way that football is moving. It seems to me. It seems like, you know, top clubs are hiring progressive managers. That way is over. But it does feel comfortable to want to revert to that thing, you know, because it gives you that false sense of comfort. You know, it makes you think, oh, well, if we'd just done it this way, then we would have got the thing we wanted, you know. But as you say, it's not always the case. It's a bit seductive, isn't it, to think that you know, that's going to deliver you the goods. It rarely does. Not these days, anyway.
And it was, of course, once he'd left the Australia and he'd gone to Japan, it was when he first started to use the inverted fullbacks, and he saw the use of them. And Pep, of course, had already started to use inverted fullbacks by then, but Ange used them in a different way. Even Pep, I think they played Manchester City while he was in Japan, Yokohama, and even Pep said no, he uses the fullbacks in a totally different way, and he sees them as attacking midfielders rather than just going on the outside and overlapping. And of course, that style of football was completely unheard of in Japan, where everyone played low block, counter-attack football. So what does he see with the fullbacks going inside, and what is his end point of trying to do that?
Yeah, I think ultimately the end point is to just give him more players in the positions he wants to deliver the football he wants, which is creditable. But I think a lot of it's probably relates back to his experiences as a player, and the fact that, you know, he just enjoyed being up the field, and he was you know, he played under Ferenc Puskas, and he played in a system where they had wingers, but they also had fullbacks, and the fullbacks would bomb on, and he was one of them, and he'd often get left exposed, I think, just by the way they attacked. And some of it, I think, was learning the lessons of that, and some of it, I think there was a quote he said something about, you know, when you're attacking, you know, when you're playing with wingers and fullbacks, it's invariably the fullbacks who are the players who are delivering the final ball, in terms of out wide, whipping it in and all that sort of stuff. But what he wants is for your attacking players to do that, you know? And so the tweaks in the system that he's sort of done is designed to ensure that the fullbacks come inside. So the person who is whipping in the cross or the cutback or the final ball is the person you want to be doing that, not the defender who's sort of filling in, but yeah, the wide player whose job is basically that, and that's their specialty. So it's wild, you know. But when I was growing up, no one did anything like that with fullbacks. You know, it was what it was. But when it works, it's pretty exciting, and you can see as well sometimes the extra numbers enable them to do things that otherwise just wouldn't be possible, I guess, if you're playing with a different formation. So yeah, he's certainly ahead of the curve on that, I'd say. Although whether he pinched the idea from Pep when he was working inside City Football Group, or whether it was something he developed himself independently, remains a point of contention.
And of course, when Ange did go there and start to play that way, those tactics of how Ange played was regularly beat the high line, regularly beaten by teams in that J League, and a derby defeat, and we've seen enough of those in recent seasons under Ange. Saw the side booed off by his own supporters, but it was actually in that game against Manchester City where they played that the principles really established, and that's what then once the penny had dropped, that's actually what took them on to the success. And funnily enough, the style of football that Ange then played has taken Japan as a nation from being a counter-attack team to one that does play on the front foot, which we saw when they knocked out Germany in a World Cup.
Yeah, I think he's had a massive impact on Japanese football, possibly more than we might even understand at this point, given so much of, you know, Japanese football discourse occurs in a language we don't understand and probably can't even access the article, so to speak. But just talking to people who have lived and breathed it over there. Massive, massive impact. It's shown the way. I think it's inspired other coaches to play a similar style, and not just because it looks good, but because it works when it works. When it works, it delivers what you want. It wins things. And yeah, I really remember that. I mean, obviously, I didn't watch a whole lot of Yokohama F. Marinos live during that time, often highlights, and certainly didn't watch the Man City friendly live. I don't even know if we could watch it here in Australia at the time, but distinctly remember, Pep's feedback afterwards and Raheem Sterling talking about he said something like, that's the best pressing team I've ever faced. And it was like, yeah, he'll get there, is what I thought when that was happening. It was like, wow. And I'm pretty sure they weren't just empty platitudes from Pep. It was, wow, you guys are really doing something that I admire and respect, and particularly within the same group as well. They would have been well aware of each other and what they're doing. All that data gets delivered to them. It's fantastic. And what you mentioned before about getting booed off the pitch and struggling initially with Yokohama, who people should remember, just because they're owned by City Football Group doesn't mean they're the richest team in Japan. They're probably mid-table as far as that goes. They're not a massive club over there in terms of finances. But that's just the process. That's the way it goes everywhere. It looks like it's not working until it works. And then once it's working, it's unbelievable. So, it's happened in a few different countries now. I'm not sure where in the process we're at with Tottenham at the moment, because it seems to have unfolded in a different way. But I've still got the faith that the end will be the same end,
I hope you're right, Vince.
Just to explain it, Rick, as well, the importance of those things. It's and our supporters can poo-poo it and say, yeah, but that's in Japan with Yokohama and this is the Premier League. It's more a case of the criticisms that we apply to him now. You can't play this way in the Premier League. He's faced those criticisms
everywhere,
every single one place where he's gone. It's that you can't come to Japan and play that high line because of all that spacing behind. Teams will just pick you off. And eventually he's done it and he's changed it. And then when he goes to Scotland, it's all right doing it in Japan, but you can't do that in Scotland. Yeah. And then it does it. And then it comes to the Premier League. So it's not a case of we're comparing the football quality. It's a question of
it's all relative, right?
It's and of course it is that there's no quality. The opposition quality in Yokohama will be below it, but then the quality of player he's got on his own team will be below Pedro Porro and Mickey van der Ven and things like that. So
that thing was even raised. Sorry, it was even raised when he went from the A-League jobs he had to international football. People here were like, "Oh, well, you can do that in the A-League, mate," but it's only the A-League. We'd say that about our own league. It's only the A-League. It's a bit shit, international football, different beast. Travel, freaking playing against Japan and South Korea, unbelievable teams. Like, surely you don't think this is going to work there. And of course it did. And for me, and people will say this because I've written the book about him, and of course you'll say this, you're Aussie, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's just happened in too many times and too many different circumstances and countries now for it to be an accident, for this bloke to not know what he's doing. Of course he bloody does. How different is football in England, really, compared to everywhere else? Still the same shape ball, still two teams of 11 players. I know there's a lot of things outside of that are different, and the finances are a different level. You've got state-owned clubs and all that sort of stuff, but it's still football. The methods should work, and in fact, the evidence is there that they can, So this is why, the Spurs experience for me has just been like, particularly early on when people were saying those sort of things and expressing their concerns or whatever, it's just like almost boring in the sense that we went through this exact same thing with Tottenham, with Celtic, sorry, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly, just around, heard it all before, mate. They said this over there and just you wait sort of thing,
It's fascinating because we are going to come on to Celtic in a second. And I mean, as we draw on to that point, Jace, what I would say back to you on this, because I was saying we're going to come on to the event shortly, but the one thing I think is being levelled at the moment is that the calibre, and I get this in terms of the style, don't get me wrong, and the teams he's had, but obviously you may argue there's better calibre of managers, better calibre of players in the Premier League. I think that's the common couple of things that are always coming back on this discussion. Is that fair, Jace, from those people out there?
Yeah, it absolutely is. But But like we're saying, at each stage, he's had that. It's
Yeah.
a better quality of player in Scotland than it is in Japan. It's a better quality of player in Japan than it is in Australia. So,
Yep.
you know, everything's relative to that. Everyone tells you can't do that here, but he goes and does it. So that's all I'm saying. And at the moment, there's nothing at Tottenham that's different to all the other jobs that he's done. That's the initial things of you can't do it here. The initial people are seeing all this space behind and teams picking you off. But he's never clicked his finger and it's worked on day one. But in time, if you stick with it, now, you know, like I've said, Rick, there are lots of us that would stick with it, and there are lots of us that would say, look, he's clearly out of his depth. And I understand why people would say that, and why I understand why people say you can't do it in the Premier League. So, you know, it's where you stand with it. It's totally up to you.
It is an individual's choice on that point. You know what? Going back, Vince, on this, the job he had done well, which Jason noted a point of player Man City, was noted by City themselves, Pep himself, and they were disappointed to lose from him outside their group when Celtic came calling. This is I'm talking about is obviously the City football group losing him. Were you surprised at that point, Vince, that other jobs hadn't come his way? Or did you always feel this was going to be a very, I say difficult process, but a process in Ange that it was always going to take its time to try and find him a big club, with all due respect?
No, I wasn't surprised that other jobs hadn't come his way, simply because he's Australian, to be honest.
Right.
And that's ultimately all it boils down to. Like,
Right.
for a club like Celtic to appoint an Australian manager was a massive leap at that point. No Australian had worked. I think the only Aussie who had worked in men's football outside of Australia before Ange went to Japan, I think there were two, and that was two other blokes who went to Japan from Australia as well. And one of them was Scottish, became a naturalised Australian. So it's not like, it just doesn't happen. And we've accepted that it doesn't happen, not because we don't know what we're talking about, but because everyone else assumes we don't know what we're talking about because of where we're from, which is, I'm pretty sure, the definition of racism, although I'm not sure I'd use that word here. It's a little bit fiercer than probably what it regards. But, like, that's the reality of it. The only reason why Ange didn't get a job at a bigger club at Celtic earlier than what he did is because the rest of world football looks down upon his achievements for the reasons that you sort of mentioned before. Oh, it's only Australia. It's only Scotland. It's only the A-League or whatever. When in reality, when you look at what he's done in the context of where he's done it and break it down and look at the actual mechanics of it, it's unbelievable every time. But unfortunately, football is dictated, even, you know, the transfer market, how much clubs spend on players comes down to factors like where are they from, what club do they play for, how many international, all those sort of things. And they're all, you know, they're not wrong. They're all indicators of someone's progression through the game, right? But those, people just saw his passport, saw his Aussie, and thought, it's too big a risk. Not only, you know, in the instance of, okay, maybe they didn't respect his achievements, but then respecting his achievements is one thing. Taking the punt on him and knowing what the reaction will be from your fan base is another thing. And that's possibly a factor that led to some clubs not taking a punt on him earlier, is because we like you, Ange, but we're not sure how this is going to wash with our fans. And as we'll get into with Celtic, initially not very well at all. And thank God they had the sort of temerity to see that through, because it paid massive dividends there. But yeah, I just can't stress enough how unprecedented it was for any European club to look at one of our managers and sort of respect them on the merits of what they've done, rather than reach a conclusion based on their perception of our football.
Well, it's fascinating.
I mean, Rick, it's a little bit like, I suppose, I think the bias against him because of that. You can almost relate it to, at some stage, I'm sure it will happen, but, you know, female manager, Emma Hayes, for instance, you know, Emma Hayes wouldn't be allowed to go to Forest Green or Rochdale or Darlington or some kind of a woman manager. But at some stage, I'm sure in the next 20 years, we will see a woman's manager, and an Emma Hayes would think, well, why can't I do it? Why can't I do the job that I've done in female football, in men's football? And I think it will come, but who's going to be the first club that looks at that and thinks, we'll have a woman's manager. It's
Mm.
you're almost in that bias, if you like. Remember
Yeah.
when Lee suggested, brought the name Emma Hayes up, and the comments were like, "Can't have a woman manager. What's he talking about?" But
Yeah.
that's the kind of prejudice that I think Postecoglou has got because he's Australian.
It's fascinating on this point because you go back to the Celtic narrative there, Vince, that his appointment was, and again, we know the station Talksport is known for the fact of having outrageous opinions on there. It was followed by a lot of ridicule where at the time fellow Scots Alan Brazil, Rangers legend Ali McCoy were highly critical of the appointment, feeling that the league and the job were way too big for a man of his experience and background, indicating that it'd be out of his depth. I'm intrigued to know, Vince, when you heard Ange was taking the Celtic job, what was your reaction, and what did you think the reaction would be of the media, and was it kind of in alignment with what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah. My reaction when he got the job was like, fuck yes, fuck yes. They've good on them for taking this punt. And there was a tweet by a colleague of mine in Australia at that time, something along the lines of, Scottish people have no idea who Ange Postecoglou is. They're going to rock his world. He's going to rock their world. And that's basically how I felt. It was like, I remember the Alan Brazil thing. I remember all the stuff. I remember reading it all and seeing it all and being on social media and looking at people, look at Ange's Wikipedia page and recognize that Yokohama finished 9th in his last season there and thinking, what's this manager who took his team to 9th in Japan going to do here? It was a great example of what I was talking about earlier and not understanding the context of someone's achievements in football based on, you just read the thing and just go, he finished 9th. Yeah, he finished 9th in a season that was affected by the coronavirus. And unlike every other competition in the world, which reduced the season or delayed it or whatever, Japan shoved their whole season into 4 months, which meant they were playing multiple games a day. And on top of that, they had the AFC Champions League commitments. And of course, Ange didn't change his style at all. Why would even in a pandemic where the schedule has been condensed, he still won't change his style. And so players were breaking down, and there were a lot of injuries, and they were just exhausted because to apply his style in that circumstance was just not possible. But of course, people don't give a shit about that in Scotland. They just saw he finished 9th and saw that he's Aussie, and Alan Brazil saw that his name was long and maybe to him funny because it's ethnic or whatever, and said Postecoglou or something like that. And he's like, and I think the other thing which speaks to all of this and was actually why Alan Brazil and Ali McCoy were being critical at that time was because Ange has a pro license in Asia, right? And this goes to, I think, the heart of what I was talking about earlier. AFC pro licenses are not recognized by UEFA as equal to their own. And so even though Ange had the highest coaching accreditations available to him in the continent where he came from, he had to get an additional certificate of competency to prove to UEFA and therefore allow, I think, his signing as manager of Celtic to go through. He had to get a certificate basically from Football Australia, which says, yeah, he's good. Ultimately, that's what the certificate said. It was like, yeah, he knows what he's doing, basically. But it's institutionally enshrined there, For me, that's ridiculous. How can a pro license in one part of the country not be equivalent to a pro license in the other? It's insane. And it says to me that it's baked into European football that you over there are lesser. You're not at our level. Doesn't matter what you've done. We look at the surface level and we deem you to be lesser. And for me, obviously, that was proved to be rubbish. And that's what I hope, if anything, is the main thing that people take from Ange's story in general, is just like, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, judge people on what they've done, not on your top line assumption of what they've done based on your biases and perceptions. Be fair dinkum. Look at it for itself, not, the rest of it. I hate that.
Yeah, it's great. Listen, I'll hand back to Jason if I can on that point on Celtic, because again, I think it's fair to say at the time of taking them over, it wasn't all just plain sailing, Jason. I will hand back to you on that point.
No, and always people down here will always say, big deal. He won a leagues with Celtic, but Celtic win loads of things anyway. But they are a massive. People underestimate how big a club Celtic are, and the demands where you kind of think, well, now is it a big club of top? Well, Celtic is a big club. Make no mistake about it. Celtic are a huge football club. And it's worth noting that when he got the job at Celtic, they just finished behind a Rangers team by 25 points. Rangers had gone all season unbeaten that year. So, and Celtic, when he went there, was seen as definitely the side in free fall. They sacked Neil Lennon, I think, 3 months before the end of that season. So he wasn't going there with Celtic at that stage as the number one side. They were very much second fiddle to Rangers and hadn't beaten Rangers at all in that previous season.
No, indeed. And in fact, he's never taken over a club that has been flying, to be honest, because that's not his go. He's a builder. He loves a project. He loves to take over something that's struggling and bring him to where they want to be. So he's never gone into a club and had immediate success as a result of previous success. He likes to pick up a club or a team and build them in his image. And that's certainly what he did with Celtic. Yeah, like I've certainly seen people dismiss what he did in Scotland because it's Scotland. And if you're not winning the league, there's only one other team that's going to. But again, that for me probably misses the other side of the structure of Scottish football in that, okay, yeah, it's a two-team league, but what massive pressure rides on those old firm games, you know? Everything you do in Glasgow is in a microscope to a point that maybe it's not like that anywhere else in world football, you know? Like that intense focus. And what it says is if you put even 1 foot wrong anywhere, basically, the other team's going to get you. And there's nothing worse to these people in Scotland than the other team getting you, you know? So really, you can look at it as, okay, it's easy, it's only Scotland. And the other side of it is, geez, what a tough place to work because it's Scotland, you know?
Yeah. I mean, on the back point we discussed about his, dealings with the media, I think it's his first in the media show there's some signs of learning there. Now he does seem to be in a placement where he's almost seemingly forecasting questions in advance and almost developed that sense almost, it may be a jokingly way, belittling what he thought were stupid questions, but maybe as much as what he did in his most recent pre-match TV interview before the Brighton game where, for those that aren't aware of that interview, and obviously it has been ridiculed since, I will just play that if I can for those that are listening, just for context, because I think the key thing with that interview is that a lot's been picked up about what he said and how he said it. And he was asked, obviously, about how Spurs would entertain Brighton ahead of that game at the Amex before. So we're going to play this and we're going to bring Vince back in on the back of it.
An open contest. So how do you keep it controlled?
Oh, we don't. Let's keep it open. That way we entertain everyone, and hopefully, get the result we want. We certainly want to, play an expansive game and be really positive. And like you said, Brighton try and do the same thing. So it should be a good game.
You won't be surprised, Vince, to know that, as you were aware, that clip went viral after the game, given what Ange said before it. I mean, are those lines that you've been used to seeing pre-game? And what do you make of that, Vince, on the back of a game where Spurs obviously had 2-0 up in the ascendancy, go on to lose it 3-2, and everybody's screaming out for, why are we not in more control of these games when you've seen an interview like that pre-man?
That was a bit of a different one for me. I don't know if I've heard Ange talk like... Look, I know what he's getting at, but he left room there to be misinterpreted, I reckon. He wants the game to be open, but it doesn't mean he doesn't want to be in control of it. It sort of goes back to what I'm saying earlier about his approach to defence. Look, he's not perfect, and he probably, if he had his time again, might have said something a little bit different there. I certainly understand the essence of what he was getting at. Maybe he misspoke, or maybe he went too far with it. I don't know, but I defy anyone to show me any situation in Ange's career where he doesn't like to have full control of a game, or where he wants the other team to score goals or to easily penetrate his team. It's just not. Yeah, it's just not there. So for me, I think he misspoke, or maybe just felt a little bit cheeky there. Maybe just wanted to say something just to see how people would react to it. So I think there's a bit of that in him these days as well. When there's a controversy or an argument or whatever, some managers run the other way. For some reason, he likes to throw a bit of petrol on the fire from time to time. It's just in him. It's a bit of a strange one for me. Yeah.
And I think the thing is with us as a fan base, that because we've become so used to having those failures, we're the first to highlight that and almost bring it to the surface. I mean, look, talk about bringing it to the surface. I mean, look, those same doubts about his ability to manage at Premier level, of course, have surfaced. And it's fair that not everybody is not only welcome the appointment, but there is a feeling that after his bright start that he has been found out, that the elite coaches we have in the Premier League can expose him tactically. And whilst there are some that plead patience, that you have to give him time to get the players fully adapted to his tactical style, fully believing in what he wants to preach and what he wants to do, that a team can't become the finished article. I'm really intrigued to know from you, Vince, with that in mind now, focusing it really back on Spurs, how long do you think it should take before we really do see the benefits coming through consistently? And again, I mean, do you understand the growing criticisms of him with each bad result, despite the odd good days, maybe recently, such as the Man United win away?
Yeah, look, good question. And it's the big question, how long? He's said in the past it usually takes his team 6 to 12 months to get where he wants them to. I have a feeling this one might be a little bit longer than that, just because of, I think, the challenges inherent in the Premier League in terms of the opposition, state-owned clubs, and also just how far along the real top teams in the Premier League are. Like, they're really excellent teams at the top. There seems to me to be a fair gap between the top few and everyone else. So maybe that'll take a little bit more time to unpick. And then also, Spurs are maybe coming from further back mentally. I guess what he's trying to do at this football club is not an overnight thing. Takes a while. If you look at some of the other, similar things that other clubs have been through, it takes more than 1-2 years to get there. It might take 2-3 or 3-4. I don't know. I doubt it, because he's an impatient guy, and he's already put his neck out there and said, "I always win things in his second season." I have my doubts whether that will happen, but I don't have any doubts about whether he will be able to get them to where they want to be at the end of it. I just think it might take another 12 months or so, maybe. I don't know. But ultimately, all that what you said before around he's been found out, these coaches can, figure him out tactically, blah, blah, blah. Heard it all before. And it's not like the managers in England have some sort of secret code that no other managers in the world have that enable them to, defeat Angeball. It's still the same game, as I was saying before. I just think they're just not there yet.
It's fascinating. I will hand back to Jason. Jason, we might need you to unmute for us.
Yeah, huge criticisms obviously came his way last season as the season came to an end, and there was that feeling of, we were going through a terrible phase at that stage with the Newcastle and the Liverpool and the Arsenal and the Chelsea defeats and things. And then, of course, we came to that Spurs City fixture. And there were so many Spurs fans flabbergasted by his apparent lack of understanding of the Spurs-Arsenal rivalry, why we would end up, so many of us, thinking, God, I hope Man City win this game. And that he should have been aware of that rivalry, particularly having come from Glasgow, where it really is about the rivalry. But as somebody on the outside, were you equally as surprised by that many of us were maybe missing his real message, and that the rivalry of Arsenal was actually kind of leaving us blind to the message he was trying to get across to us?
Yeah. Look, this one probably won't be too popular with many Spurs fans, for my opinion on this one, but I thought that was really poor. And people say, you guys in Australia, you don't have rivalries like us. You don't understand. No, like, we've got rivalries here, and like, let it be known, I'm a world-class hater. I know what it means to hate. I have hate deep within me for certain people and entities. I know what it means to despise a group of people with every fiber of your being. Trust me. But where I draw the line, I guess, is wanting yourself to suffer so that can happen, I guess. I personally, yes, I appreciate it's a difficult situation for Spurs fans to be in there. I appreciate that your mates who are Arsenal fans might send you some, nasty messages on WhatsApp if they happen to win the title or whatever. But for me, you've just got to... You've just got who cares about that? Like, you've just got to focus on yourself. And I draw the line at, wanting to inflict misery upon myself so that misery can be inflicted upon someone else. That's my view. It's clearly Ange's view as well. I was not surprised at how Spurs fans reacted during that time. Or maybe I was surprised that Ange played it the way he did. Maybe he should have foreseen that they were going to be like that, and that there's no point in really trying to battle against that. But then the other side of that is maybe that's exactly the kind of mentality that he's trying to change throughout the whole football club, and that includes the fans as well, I think. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe he sees that mentality as part of what has undermined Spurs in the past. I don't know. All I know is I would never want my team, whoever that team is, to lose a game, regardless of the consequences, just because it meant a rival would not win something. For me, I just can't understand that, can't get on board with that, and I appreciate people who have other opinions, but that's mine, and I'll never change, and it doesn't look like Ange will ever change either, and hopefully such a circumstance never occurs again, because it was very much a sort of lunar eclipse sort of in terms of regularity kind of areas there. It's not common, and I think it was uncomfortable for everyone.
It was.
I think what he got right on it, Rick, was he said the best way to stop somebody else winning something is to win it yourself.
Well, that's spot on. That's what I believe as well.
We kind of lost that message in it. I think there was an overreaction from us to how he interpreted it. When you read between the lines of a lot of what he said was making sense of it. So, kind of in between on that press conference.
But I also get it.
It was as bad as everyone thought.
Yeah, I understand it though too, because you guys haven't had a whole lot of success in the past, and I know that when was the last time Arsenal won the title, and there's a lot riding on that sort of. Do they win it first before we do or whatever? Like I get that. Like I fully understand it, but I just reckon, how can you go to a game or watch a game where your team's playing in it and sort of outwardly or even inwardly barrack against them? For me, I just don't have that in me.
That's fair. I mean, I think, again, it's one of those things where it will be each his own opinion. But I think when you look at the fact that we talk about winning there, I mean, as I touched earlier on this, Vince, he has stressed the point that he always wins in his second season. I'm just intrigued to what you feel on that, whether that has ramped up more pressure in now to deliver this season. You said yourself there, you're not sure if Spurs will win anything, but in hindsight, do you think he wishes he didn't say that? What do you think? Or do you think he was right to double down? Because what he's saying, it is true. He has won in his second season, wherever he's been.
Yeah. Would I do that if I was Ange? Probably not. But that's because I'm not Ange. Like, this guy's in his own head. He knows who he is and how he operates and all that sort of stuff. And it does ramp up the pressure on him. But that's all. He wanted that. It was calculated to me. And what was he trying to achieve there? For me, it seemed like it was a message maybe to the players. I'm not sure. It was a message of, I'm absolutely confident in what I'm doing, and I believe it will bring success, and there's nobody who can tell me differently. You know, that's a huge thing to say out loud the way he did, in the way he did it, and everything he does has a purpose. And this one, I think, might have been some sort of message he was sending to the squad, perhaps, just in terms of, if you guys are wavering, if you're not sure, if you're not as sure as I am that this brand of football will deliver us success, just listen to me. I am prepared to put my neck on the line publicly and say this. That's how much I believe in what we're doing. Who's with me? I think that's what he was trying to do there. Yeah. Or I mean, he's also just generally speaking, he's a character who, if he sees a risky situation, as I sort of mentioned before, he'll gallop towards it. He won't run away from it. That's just a character trait of his. He will do that, and he will live or die by the sword. That's his choice. But his history shows there's not much dying by the sword when it comes to Ange Postecoglou. No, I think it's fair to say. I mean, look, I ask about the scrutiny the Premier League brings all around the world. That makes it his toughest job. And you know what? We look back at, obviously, the heavy defeat suffered at the end of last season, and then now the huge criticism from the media and some supporters. That might be putting him under more pressure for results than ever before. How do you think
he'll deal with that and also try and maintain his own reputation? And do you think he'll benefit from almost somewhat say our belief, somewhat say through stubbornness? And in a way, this job that he's got now, it's intriguing to know whether this will either be, I say, the making of him, but he's already achieved so much in his career anyway, that to get to the Premier League in itself, I'm sure you'll tell me, Vince, is his biggest achievement to date. If he wins that at Tottenham, I'm not sure. I think it is game over, because from there, I mean, where do you go after winning something with Tottenham for a club that haven't won for so long? But I mean, could it also be his downfall by, some would say, this stubbornness to maybe not change? But then you've seen him have so much success outside of Tottenham.
Well, it's live or die by the sword, right? That's
Yep.
his choice. That's how he operates. And history shows it works well for him. And if it's happened so many times in that way for him, why would you approach it sort of any differently? Like I've just seen too much in too many circumstances over the years to suggest that that he will die by the sword, that this won't work. I still have massive amounts of faith in him and what he's doing at Tottenham Hotspur. Now, of course, people will say, you wrote the book on him. You're Aussie. Clearly you love him. You must have a good relationship with him or whatever. And, all of that's true, but I'm just talking on the evidence that I've seen over 15 years. It's compelling. It's overwhelming. I sort of challenge anyone to read my book and not come away with at least some level of enhanced faith and optimism about what's happening there. In terms of the scrutiny, yeah, it's definitely at a level higher than what he's ever experienced before, but I wouldn't worry too much about that because, the scrutiny in Australian football when he was Socceroos coach, okay, much smaller community, much smaller media, much less focus, but, you can't underestimate how much what he was doing there mattered to him in a level that probably doesn't matter to him at the same way when he's working for clubs that hire him. He's representing his country, and he's trying to basically deliver his childhood dream, which is for this sport of ours in Australia to have a bigger role in basically the way we live our lives. And so the scrutiny might have been smaller in volume, but I think it was sharper just in terms of emotionally what it means to him, all that sort of stuff. Which is all to say that scrutiny for me, for Ange Postecoglou, is water off a duck's back. If anything, if he gets anything out of the scrutiny, or if there is any impact, it's just to reinforce his beliefs in what he's doing and make him want to do it even more. So, yeah, you could say I'm going down with the ship, but I don't think the ship's going down.
Love that. How about you, Jace?
Yeah, I mean, many ex-players and that he's worked with, and even at Tottenham, we've seen Kulusevski's a prime example, talking about Ange's, how he addresses the team, his motivational abilities and things. But at what stage do those motivational abilities stop working in a dressing room if defeats start to shake the belief both on and off the pitch?
Yeah, look, good question. I don't know if I have a good answer because I've never been in a dressing room and heard him speak, and I've never well, there's not been too many situations really in Ange's career where he's got them to where they want to be, and then defeats have, I guess, started to make them wonder whether that's the way anymore. The only time I can think of is, and this is going back a while, is after Brisbane Roar won their 36 games in a row, which set a new, were unbeaten for 36 games in a row, I should say, which set a new record in Australian sport for the longest unbeaten streak we've ever seen in any code. Brisbane Roar lost 5 games in a row. So there was clearly some sort of mental come down, mental capitulation which occurred there that obviously exerted themselves so far to get to that magic 36 number, which was the one that broke the record and set the record. They fell into a heap afterwards and lost 5 games in a row. Now, I would imagine during that 5-game spell that there were some players in that dressing room who thought maybe the magic spell is off. I'm not sure. What I do know is how they reacted, and that is that Ange briefly changed the formation to 3 at the back, basically to try and, I guess, induce a different reaction on the pitch from his players in those circumstances, just to change something up. They eventually got back to winning ways and then won the title through the A-League Grand Final a few months after that. That's really the only time I can think of where player, faith or belief has been shaken. Maybe another time was during the Socceroos World Cup qualification campaign for Russia that we spoke about earlier. Some results didn't go their way. It's not like they lost, though. They just drew games that they were expected to win. But my understanding from talking to a lot of the players who were involved there is nobody's belief was shaken. They just, not everything can go perfectly, I guess, all of the time. But yeah, look, hard to imagine how any Ange Postecoglou speech to a playing group would ever get old or feel ineffective when you look at some of the videos that are out there and read some of the stuff that's in my book. There's a whole chapter dedicated to his pre and halftime team talks, and you read some of that stuff. And yeah, if there's a brick wall nearby you, I'd worry about whether it's still standing after finishing that chapter.
Ange himself has talked about the second season, and of course it's become such a big talking point, and the interpretation of that is that he's effectively said, look, I will win at Tottenham this year. And it's also said he doesn't stay at clubs for much more than 2 years. So if we do indeed reach the end of the season, some people are opinion that it'll be sacked before that. Others will think, I don't know, we'll see the season through. But if we do reach the end of the season without silverware, where would that leave him? Is he likely to think, do you know what, maybe this is just impossible to do it here and walk away? Or do you think it would fire him up even more to say, no, I'm sticking this through until the bitter end, until I do see the success?
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere, even if you did win something this season. Because why would you? What a fantastic football club to try and rebuild. Like, Tottenham is a blank canvas in some ways for the right manager. It's fabulous facilities, stadium, unbelievable, best I've seen, training facility. What a place to go to work every day. You're in London, amazing city, global city. You're at a London club in the Premier League, and that club plays the way that club plays and its traditions and the way you think football should be played are fucking completely aligned. So it's like, what a place to be at for him. I can't see him going anywhere for a little while, just because he's tended to have 2-3 year stints at other clubs in the past. Doesn't mean he will here. Those situations in the past have been because he's had opportunities to climb up the ladder that he hasn't been able to turn down. That's why he only stayed at Celtic for 2 years, is because he had an opportunity to go somewhere else. Where will he go after Tottenham? I don't know. But until he's won things, for my opinion, nowhere. He never walks away from a job that's half finished, except maybe the Socceroos. He could have taken them to the World Cup in 2018, but he said that he didn't feel that was part of the job. He felt just qualifying them was what he needed to do, and fair enough. But if you get to the end of this season, you haven't won anything, and he hasn't been sacked, he's not going anywhere. I don't think so.
Vince, the interrogation is nearly over. I've got to say, it's been a really, really enjoyable show where I think, when we get someone like yourself on that has seen everything there has to see in Ange's career, that we learn a lot. And again, I think for some fans out there, gives them a sense of perspective, gives them a sense of maybe where we are on this journey and the fact that things can take a little bit more time than usual under somebody. I think one thing I have to put to you is that ultimately, when you look at many of the really big matches he's managed in, be it in the Australian national side, Yokohama in the Asian Champions League, Celtic in European competitions, or Spurs in some of the big London derbies, you'd say so far, the likes of Chelsea, West Ham, and we've obviously got West Ham coming up again this weekend, that his methods have not really worked when faced with a superior side, but he's been the underdog. And many of those defining moments, I've seen him take plaudits for the style, but not the win in the actual result. So I'm really intrigued to know from you, because I asked the likelihood of winning a trophy. Domestically in England, you're going to have to come up against the likes, as we know, in the Carabao Cup, Man City, a Liverpool, a Chelsea, or Arsenal in a semi-final or a final or even both. Can he get over that line, do you think? Will he need to get over that line in order to achieve success in this country for you?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why he can't. Spurs have gone all right from memory in a couple of games against Man City, if I'm not mistaken. It's not like they've looked as if they don't belong on that pitch with those players, like they've taken the game to them. And I don't think you guys have beaten City from memory, I don't think, in Ange's last season, but it didn't seem like you're a million miles away from it to me. And that goes for sort of all the other teams there. I'm not sure I sort of agree with the premise that he's not beaten a better side, so to speak, because you've just got to. First of all, there haven't been too many opportunities for him to play a team where he's been massively mismatched throughout his career.
Yep.
Look, you want to talk about Champions League in Asia, even with Brisbane Roar back in the day, they played the football he wanted to play. They just didn't get the result, I guess. Celtic, you could see they played Real Madrid in his second season there. And their first half was wow, Celtic are right in this against Real Madrid. They should have been, from memory, 2 or 3-0 up. It was just a matter of not getting those chances. But his methodology created those chances against a team like Real Madrid at Celtic Park. And yeah, Real Madrid ended up winning. But you could see that had they continued to gone down that road, there might have been something there for them, What's his... Yeah, look, it's a good question. I'm trying to think of what his standout result is, his one game that he hangs his hat on, but he doesn't hang his hat on one game. He hangs his hat on whole seasons, on bigger achievements,
Yep.
Brisbane Roar were not the best team in the A-League when they won the A-League. Yokohama were not the best team in the J-League when they won the J-League. Celtic were definitely the best team in Scotland when they did it, but they came from a while back, and the Socceroos were never fancied to the level that you think they might have been throughout Asia. They weren't the favourites to win the Asian Cup in 2015, but they did it anyway. We are seen to be a lesser team than Japan and South Korea, and even Saudi Arabia sometimes as well. I hope that answers your question, but really the answer is, for me, is just wait. Just wait.
Well,
I reckon it'll happen.
You've made this point, actually, and like I say, before we close out the show on this point, you do feel that having that patience, that waiting process, you say, do you feel Ange will leave Tottenham with some form of silverware when that time does come?
I do think so. I don't know when. I don't know what it will be. But I just don't see anything that makes me think it's not going to happen. I just don't.
Interesting.
Now, I could be wrong. There's a chance I'm very wrong, but I just make calls based on things, evidence, and the evidence I've seen before Tottenham and at Tottenham says to me that he'll get there eventually if he's given the chance. And for me, the other question is what's the alternative if you're Spurs? Do you sack him and start another project with another manager, or do you go down the road that you just went down with Conte and Mourinho and by some psychotic twist of mindset you perceive that to be the way to go now, even though it's not? For me, it's a bit like, what else are you going to do? Are you going to go and get Pep? That's not going to happen. For me, it's just the indicators are there. They're positive. The guy carries himself extremely well. Everything he does is matched perfectly with what the club says it's about. For me, I would just wait. But then again, I haven't had the lifetime of supporting a Spurs fan where my patience has been run this thin. I've got patience. I hope the rest of you do too.
Vince, I've got to say, it's been an absolute pleasure. We can't thank you enough. Nearly 2 hours of your time. For those that haven't gone and bought the book, please, we urge you to do so. I'm sure Jason, I say bless, Jason is holding up there for our watching audience, for those that are obviously watching this back, but for our viewing, obviously, listeners as well. A really enjoyable book to know Ange in more detail, and at a time where, for those that do need to be reminded of why sticking with the process is an age-old indicator, we would urge you to go and buy that book that has become very, very popular. And you know what? I mean, on this point, Vince, I'm sure you agree that it's been a journey so far. I mean, given the fact that I say you've become accustomed with Spurs even more in the last 14 months, you've made this point now. It is a waiting process. Would that be your message to Spurs fans out there? Keep patient, Vince?
Pretty much. Although, I'd like to hope it's not going to be too long, because for me, the football this season has been largely, quite convincing, just missing the final bit at the end, the goals that get you the wins. But they're doing the right things. They seem to be building to me in the right way. What happened against Brighton was a shock and hopefully an aberration and hopefully something that the players have learned from. If they have, I'd be very excited about what lies ahead. If they have learned that lesson that you must do this all the time, then that's a positive thing. If they haven't, then that's a concern and it might take a little bit longer. But trust me, Ange won't be there in the dressing room inside the clubs saying, sorry, guys, this might take longer than I thought. He will be in there saying, no, let's do everything we can today to make sure it happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
That will be his message. My message is just have faith in him. Take him, listen to him, read the book if you want, and please buy as many copies as you'd like. Give them out. But just, breathe in what he's saying. Understand it. Look at the football. Try to cast your emotions aside and look at the football for what's happening. And if you do that, and if you're just a little bit patient, then hopefully good times are just around the corner.
Vince, you've been an absolute star.
I was going to say, Rick, I think with the book, what you take from it is, and again, we're not talking whether you're pro Ange, whether you're against him or not. It's not so much to enforce that, but it's more a case of understanding that what people accuse him of stubbornness, or what others would say is that's why he's got the beliefs. It's to understand why he does things in the way that he does, and when people say you want him to tweak, when you read the book like that, you'll understand just why he won't change. Whether people want him to or not, he will not change his ways, and you get those answers from the book, whether you agree with them or not. That's what you take from it.
Well, listen, again, I'm sure Jason will say it's been an absolute pleasure having Vince on to discuss it in such detail. We really do appreciate it. Vince, we can't thank you enough. For those that want to see you more, hear you more, find you even more, where can they do that, Vince, these days?
Oh, yeah. Like at Vince Rugari on Twitter and Instagram and all that. The book, just Google Angeball. I do much more regular stuff for the Sydney Morning Herald. If people are interested in that, although, unless you want to know about the peculiarities of the Socceroos and where the A-League's heading, probably not. But we do the odd bit of Spurs stuff. Sometimes we live blog the games, and sometimes we, dip in with a bit of analysis on how things are going. So every now and then, a Spurs piece will pop up for me there. But thanks for having me, guys, as well. It's been good fun.
Oh, listen, pleasure's been all ours. Nearly 3,000 of you watch this show live again, guys. We can't thank you enough for your support. Like I say, go and get the book if you haven't already. Fascinating, again, insight into Ange Postecoglou. And as Jason says there, you learn so much about the methodology, why, when those are asking for him to tweak, why he will stick to his own vehement plan. But look, we can't thank you enough. From Jason, from Vince, from myself, we've been the last one on Spurs, guys. Please keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on, you Spurs.